A man lies naked against a wall of chalky limestone, his blood drying slowly into the red dust. The crowd around them is quiet, waiting for the controversial rabbi from Nazareth to stumble over the Torah. Jews and Samaritans certainly do not bleed on each other. The hatred is centuries old. It is baked into their very bones. A first-century Jew would rather die than drink water from a Samaritan's cup. A Samaritan would gladly watch a Jew die in the desert. But the man in the dirt has no choice. His purity laws cannot save him now. His pedigree cannot stop the bleeding. He is stripped of his pride. He is stripped of his title. He is stripped of his ethnic superiority. He is reduced to a body in need of breath. He can only receive. Look at the triangle of power on the road. The priest walked away. The Levite kept his distance. The holy men protected their status. The despised outsider is doing the work of God. Jesus is twisting the knife. He is taking the enemy and making him the hero. He is taking the victim and making him dependent on the outcast. He is taking the religious establishment and exposing its rot. This is not a lesson in community service. It is a social earthquake. The lawyer wanted a boundary. He wanted to know exactly who he had to love. He wanted to know exactly who he was allowed to ignore. Jesus obliterates the line entirely. He forces the lawyer to imagine his own worst enemy as his only hope for survival. The lawyer has just tried to trap him with a technicality, asking a question designed to draw a neat, comfortable boundary around his own obligations. The Samaritan leads the animal down the canyon. The shadows grow long against the red rocks. The heat of the wilderness finally breaks. He brings the man to an inn. He stays awake through the dark night, listening to the ragged breathing of a man who would normally spit on him. The story could end here, and it would already be a masterpiece. But the detail that exposes our own hearts is not what happens in the dirt of the first century. It is what happens when we look at how we have sanitized this exact same story today. You sit in a padded chair listening to a sermon, or you look up at a polished brass plaque on the wall of a brightly lit hospital corridor, and you see the name Good Samaritan. You probably picture someone in a high-visibility vest handing out water bottles after a storm. You imagine a polite, smiling volunteer. You envision a clean, structured charity environment where the rules are clear, the risks are managed, and everyone goes home to a quiet house at the end of the day. We have not preserved the meaning of the parable. We have domesticated it. When you read this text from the safety of the 21st century, it is dangerously easy to cast yourself as the hero of the dirt road. You assume you would be the one to stop. You assume your empathy would override your schedule. And who is my neighbor? He wants a legal definition. He wants a checklist. Jesus gives him a corpse on a desert road. But look closely at the actual, physical texture of your daily routine. How often do you cross the street to avoid the man muttering to himself on the corner? How quickly do you press the lock button inside your car when a shadow approaches the intersection? We all have our own Levitical laws. We have our own modern boundaries of zip codes, political affiliations, and social classes that tell us exactly who is safe to approach and who is a contaminant to our peace. We want the identity of the Samaritan without the terror of the canyon. We want to heal the broken. But we prefer to do it with a digital transfer tapped into a pristine glass screen. We want to outsource the splanchnizome. We drop a check in a wooden box. Or we set up a recurring monthly donation. And we hire professionals to touch the blood, to smell the sharp copper of the open wounds, to feel the grit of the limestone dust. This is not a condemnation of generosity. It is a mirror held up to our isolation. Jesus is pressing his finger on the exact place where your theology intersects with your physical body. If your belief system allows you to maintain a permanent, sanitized distance from the agonizing mess of the people around you, Jesus is warning you that your religion is functioning exactly like the priests. Most people assume they know exactly what this story means. You have probably heard it a dozen times. You are walking down the mountain. Your duties are finished. You are keeping yourself perfectly clean. The Samaritan did not have a non-profit foundation. He had his own two hands, his own leather skin of wine, and his own willingness to become utterly contaminated to save a man who would normally spit on his shadow, compassion is not a polite gesture from a safe distance. It is a physical collision with the pain of another. But the Samaritan's collision does not end when the bleeding stops. The long night finally passes. Morning breaks over the harsh Judean canyon. And before the outsider leaves, the wounded man in the care of an innkeeper, he reaches into his own purse, and he makes a promise that defies all human economic logic. Morning breaks over the canyon floor. The inn is quiet, smelling of stale wood smoke and the sharp tang of medicinal oil. The wounded man is breathing evenly now, wrapped in clean linen, lying in the shadows of a rented room. He has nothing. No clothes, no money, no way to pay for the roof over his head. If he is thrown out into the street, the desert will finish what the robbers started. The Samaritan stands at the wooden table. He reaches into his heavy leather pouch. He pulls out 2 silver denarii. We use the phrase Good Samaritan as a cultural shorthand for anyone who stops to change a flat tire or pays for a stranger's groceries. 2 full days' wages in the Roman economy. Enough to pay for weeks of food and lodging at a roadside shelter. He places them on the rough grain of the wood. You can hear the heavy metal clink against the timber. He looks at the innkeeper. He gives a command, and then he makes a staggering promise. Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Listen to the absolute recklessness of that statement. He is signing a blank check in the middle of a desert. He does not set a budget limit. He does not demand an itemized receipt. He does not leave a contract for the victim to sign, demanding repayment with interest once he recovers. He hands over an open account. He underwrites the man's entire future. This is not a polite act of charity. It is an invasion of grace. Charity draws a line. Grace crosses it. Charity calculates the minimum. Grace empties the purse. Charity leaves when the bleeding stops. Grace promises to return. The Samaritan is doing for this broken, stripped, half-dead man exactly what the God of Israel has always done for his people. He is stepping into the dirt. He is absorbing the cost of the rescue. He is guaranteeing the restoration. We name hospitals after it. We pass laws protecting people who try to help at the scene of an accident, and we call them Good Samaritan laws. When Jesus speaks these words, the air in the Jerusalem courtyard goes completely still. The lawyer is cornered. He wanted to talk about minimum requirements. He wanted to know the absolute least he could do to inherit eternal life. He wanted a clean, manageable, mathematical religion where he held all the cards, where the boundaries were clear, and where God simply signed off on his flawless ledgers. Jesus shatters the ledger. He shows the lawyer that the kingdom of heaven does not operate on legal technicalities. It operates on a bleeding, gut-wrenching, boundary-breaking compassion that leaves nothing in reserve. The priest kept his purity. The Levite kept his schedule. The Samaritan gave his oil, his wine, his animal, his silver, and his reputation. He did not just bandage the wounds. He secured the man's tomorrow. But as the story echoes off the temple walls, Jesus turns his eyes back to the lawyer who started it all. And before the man can look away, Jesus asks a single question that flips the entire universe upside down. The lawyer asked a question of boundaries. Who is my neighbor? He wanted a target. He wanted a circle drawn in the shifting sand. He wanted to know exactly who was inside and who was outside. He wanted God to mathematically endorse his prejudice. Most people read this as a simple moral fable. Be kind. Help those in need. Don't ignore the hurting. And it does carry that weight on the surface. Jesus finishes the story. The courtyard is dead silent. Jesus looks at the expert in the law. He does not answer the question. He destroys it. Which of these 3, do you think, proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? Do you see the structural shift? Do you feel the rhetorical trap close around the lawyer's throat? The lawyer wanted to define the recipient. Jesus demands he identify the actor. The lawyer was looking for a legal loophole. Jesus hands him a devastating mirror. The question is no longer, who deserves my help? The question is now, Whose humanity am I willing to share? The Greek text uses the verb ginomai. It means to become, to emerge, to transition from one state to another. Jesus is not asking who inherently was a neighbor by birth. He is asking who became a neighbor in the dust and the blood. The priest had the title. The Levite had the pedigree. The lawyer had the theology. None of it mattered in the canyon. Titles do not stop bleeding. Pedigrees do not bind wounds. Theology does not lift a half-dead man onto an animal. The kingdom of God does not care about your doctrinal precision if your hands are completely clean of human suffering. But if you look closer at the specific Greek verbs used, at the deeply embedded cultural rules of first-century purity, to answer Jesus, the lawyer has to speak the unthinkable. He has to admit the hated outsider did the work of God. He has to acknowledge the catastrophic failure of his own priesthood. He has to confess the absolute moral bankruptcy of his pristine, heavily guarded religious system. He cannot even bring himself to say the word. The word Samaritan refuses to pass his lips. The taste of defeat is bitter on his tongue. He stares down at the dust, covering his own leather sandals. He mutters a generic summary. The one who showed him mercy. Jesus looks at him. You go, and do likewise. The conversation is over. The debate is finished. This is the terrifying, inescapable reality of the text. Faith is not a legal standing you defend. It is a mercy you enact. Holiness is not the contamination you avoid. It is the restoration you provide. Justification is not found in the pristine sanctuary at the top of the mountain. It is found in the dirt you are willing to kneel in at the bottom, but to feel the full, crushing weight of what happens on that desert road. You have to pull back and look at the entire journey one last time. A lawyer asked for a legal boundary and received a bleeding body. A priest walked down the mountain to protect his comfort. And at the actual topographical map of the terrain where this bleeding man is lying, you start to realize that Jesus is doing something much more dangerous and exposed the emptiness of his religion. A Levite calculated the risk of defilement and left a man to die in the dirt. A despised outsider felt his stomach tear and crossed a centuries-old divide. A beaten man lost his proud pedigree and was saved. By the enemy, he was taught to hate. A rented room became a roadside sanctuary, and 2 silver coins secured a shattered future. A question of who deserves our love was destroyed and replaced with the mandate to become a neighbor. Same road, same blood, one devastating kingdom. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the direction of the priest's feet. Katabino. He wasn't rushing toward his duty. He was walking away from the temple with a perfectly clear calendar. He was carrying all the lingering smoke and the beautiful liturgy of the sanctuary. And he still stepped to the far side of the path. It is terrifying how easy it is to carry the smell of the temple and still leave a man to die in the dust. If you are in a season where your religion feels like a list of boundaries, where you have become consumed with who is safe and who is contaminated, who is right and who is wrong, look at the dirt of the Jericho Road. God does not need another lawyer defining the grand than teaching a lesson on manners. This is not a story about being nice. It is a devastating indictment of an entire religious machine. Limits of his grace. He needs a body willing to feel the visceral, gut-wrenching pain of a broken world and actually touch the wounds. And may the God who did not stay safely in the pristine heights of heaven, but plunge down into the dust of our own brokenness, give you the courage to cross the road and do likewise. The sun is baking the canyon floor. There is no shade here, only the sharp, jagged shadows of the caves above. The lawyer asked a question to justify his life. Jesus answers with a scenario that dismantles the man's entire theology, brick by brick. And the first blow does not land with the arrival of the Samaritan. It lands much earlier. Hiding quietly in the geographical direction, the first traveler is walking. To see the trap Jesus is setting, you have to look at the priest, and you have to look at his feet. By chance, a priest was going down that road. That is Luke chapter 10, verse 31. It sounds like a simple stage direction. It is not. It is a calculated ambush. Jesus uses a specific Greek verb here. The word is katabainon, from the root katabeno, kata meaning down, and beno meaning to step or to walk. To walk down. It is a word of gravity, a word of dropping altitude. Jerusalem sits on a mountain ridge. It is 2,500 feet above sea level. Jericho sits in a tectonic rift. It is 800 feet below the ocean's surface. You do not stroll between them. You plunge. In the ancient Jewish mindset, you always go up to Jerusalem. You go up to the temple. You go up to the presence of God. Therefore, when a priest is katabino going down, he is moving in only one possible direction. Away from the sanctuary. Away from his duties. You can hear the wind funneling through the gorge, carrying the sound of small rocks tumbling down the incline, but no voices. Away from the altar. This single verb changes the entire moral weight of the story. Most modern readers try to defend this priest. We read our own frantic lives into the text. We assume he is rushing to work. We assume he is late to officiate a service. We assume he must maintain absolute ritual purity so he can step into the holy place without violating the law. He is not protecting his duty. He is protecting his convenience. In the first century, the priesthood is divided into 24 divisions. Each division serves at the temple for 2 weeks out of the year. Jericho is a popular retreat city for the religious elite. It is an oasis of palm trees and cool water. Half the priestly class lives there when they are off duty. When Jesus says the priest is going down, the original audience hears something we miss entirely. They hear the sigh of relief of a man heading on vacation. His shift is over. The heavy bronze doors of the sanctuary are closed behind him. The smell of roasted lamb and thick frankincense is still lingering in the fibers of his linen robes. The chants of the Levite choir are still echoing in his ears. He has a completely clear calendar. No footsteps. Just the ragged, uneven breathing of a body that has been stripped, beaten, and left exactly halfway between life and death. He has no pressing religious obligations waiting for him in Jericho. He has nothing but free time and a downhill walk. He has every possible opportunity to stop. This is not an accident of storytelling. It is a surgical strike on the lawyer's worldview. Jesus is removing the ultimate excuse. He is asking a devastating question of the religious establishment. When your official duties are finished, what is left of your religion? When the temple service is over, does the mercy of God follow you down the mountain? Or does it stay locked in the sanctuary? The priest sees the man. He sees the bruised flesh. He sees the pooling blood. He steps to the opposite side of the dusty path. He chooses his own comfort over another man's survival. The system has trained him to see a bleeding body as a contamination, not a crisis. But Jesus is not done tightening the screws on his audience. Because right behind the priest, another figure is making the exact same descent, a man carrying even stricter rules, a man who will look at the same blood and face a much more terrifying legal dilemma. The dust kicks up again in the dry canyon wind. A Levite stops on the ridge. This is the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, 17 miles of descending switchbacks, dropping 3,300 feet through the barren Judean wilderness. He looks down at the crumpled, bruised form bleeding out into the dirt. The flies are already beginning to gather around the open wounds, and the man is completely motionless. Jesus specifies that the robbers left the traveler half dead, which means he is unconscious, unable to speak, and stripped of his clothing. In the ancient Near East, you do not determine a stranger's identity by their face. You know them by their garments, which declare their class, their trade, and their ethnic origin. If they have no clothes, you know them by their dialect when they speak. But this man has no clothes and no voice. He is a blank slate of suffering, unclassifiable, unnameable. The Levite stands there, staring at the motionless chest, running the terrifying calculus of Levitical law. According to the Book of Numbers, touching a human corpse renders a man ritually unclean for 7 days. It requires a massive disruption of life, an elaborate purification ritual. and a temporary exile from the community of the pure. If the man is dead, he is a contaminant. If the man is alive, but a foreigner. His blood might still be a source of defilement. To find out the truth, the Levite would have to step off the safe path. He would have to kneel in the dirt. It is a harsh, vertical drop from the cool, sacred elevation of the temple courts down to the suffocating heat of the Dead Sea Basin. Place his hands on the bruised chest and feel for breath on the man's cracked, bleeding lips. He would have to risk his own standing in the community. He is not making a heartless decision. He is making a legal calculation. He looks at the blood drying on the limestone. He looks at the clear road ahead. He decides the risk is too high. He crosses over to the far side of the canyon path, keeping a precise, legally mandated distance between his holy identity and the dying man. And he continues his walk toward Jericho. You can almost hear the silence in the crowd listening to Jesus. He has just taken the two most respected, theologically educated figures in their society and exposed their religion as completely useless to a dying man. He is showing the lawyer what happens when you build a system of faith entirely around avoiding what is dirty, rather than healing what is broken. The trap has snapped shut on the religious elite, and then a third shadow falls across the road, and the sound of an approaching animal echoes against the canyon walls. The crowd expects a specific rhythm to this story. In first-century Jewish storytelling, there is a standard triad: priest, Levite, Israelite. That is the hierarchy. If the first two fail, the layman is supposed to come along and shame the clergy by doing the right thing. In the first century, it is known as the ascent of Adumim, the pass of red rocks, but the locals have another name for it. Instead, Jesus drops a theological bomb into the narrative. He introduces a Samaritan, an outsider, a half-breed, a man whose very shadow is considered a defilement by the people listening to Jesus speak. But the detail that changes how you read this entire encounter isn't just the man's nationality. It is the specific word Jesus uses to describe what happens inside of him when he sees the blood. Luke chapter 10, verse 3-3. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. The word translated as compassion is the Greek verb splanchnisomai. Say it out loud. It even sounds violent. Its root is the noun splanchnon, which literally translates to the bowels, the intestines, the internal organs. In the ancient world, they did not locate the seat of emotion in the mind or the heart. They located it in the gut. It is the place where your stomach drops. It is the place where you feel physical, sickening pain. When you witness something unbearable, it is a rare word, reserved for the heaviest moments of the New Testament. They call it the way of blood. It is the perfect place for an ambush, and it is the perfect place for a story. It is the exact same word used in Luke 15, when a father looks down a dusty road and sees his prodigal son walking home in rags. It is the exact same word used in Matthew 9, when Jesus looks out over a shattered, leaderless crowd, and his stomach churns for them. Splanchnidzomai is not a polite feeling of pity. It is a physical tearing of the gut. It is a visceral, agonizing identification with the suffering of another human being. The priest felt caution. The Levite felt calculation. The Samaritan feels a punch to the stomach. If feeling the raw, the physical weight of the original Greek is changing how you read these familiar stories, you're exactly who this channel is for. Subscribe and leave a comment below. Even one word helps, because every week we uncover the layers hiding in plain sight. So the Samaritan's gut twists, and his feet hit the dirt. He does not ask for the man's name. He does not ask for his tribal affiliation. He does not wait for a confession of faith. He steps into the blood. He pours oil to soothe the torn flesh. He pours wine to burn out the infection. He binds the wounds, pressing his own hands against the dirt and the grit and the broken skin. Jesus is standing in a crowded space, locking eyes with an expert in religious law. The dust from the road is still on his sandals. His theology is not a boundary to protect. It is a medicine to pour out. But to understand the true scandal of what he is doing, you have to look at the power dynamic shifting in the dust. The Samaritan lifts the dead weight. The wounded man groans in the heat. Blood stains the Samaritan's own garments. He does not hesitate. He heaves the broken body onto his own animal. He takes the leather reins in his hands. He walks in the stinging dust. Every step down the canyon is dangerous. The robbers could still be watching from the limestone caves above. The Samaritan is risking his own life just by staying on the road. But the danger is even worse than the bandits. He is a Samaritan traveling deep in hostile Jewish territory. If a Jewish patrol finds him leading a donkey with a bloody, half-dead Jewish man on its back, they will not ask questions. They will assume he is the attacker. They will execute him in the dirt. He knows the risk. He takes the reins anyway. He walks. The crowd listening to Jesus in Jerusalem is completely silent. They are choking on the image, because in their world, this scene is impossible. Jews and Samaritans do not speak. Jews and Samaritans do not share meals.